Hi, this is Corinna Koenig, and I am back to talk about existentialism and psychology and authentic ways of living. Again, I do have some of what I want to talk about in front of me. That's just to reduce the cognitive load, to make sure that I can cover all the concepts that I want to talk about without forgetting to include important things in the conversations, that I can make the points that I feel are important to make. I just want to let you know that, so that if you're wondering why the heck is she looking down all the time, that's why I'm looking down. So although existentialism postulates that it's the subjective individual which gives meaning to life, that authenticity can't be removed from the exploration of what it means to be human, it doesn't negate that the objective experience is important. It doesn't say that the objective experience doesn't have meaning. We're not going to argue about whether or not you can have a truly objective experience. It's a whole nother conversation. We're just going to talk about it as like a shared experience, or a shared experience that two people can communicate to one another. And so this is where the concept of Don Juan can come back in again, in which any shared objective experience that Don Juan was having with the women that he was connecting with held less value to him than his hedonistic practices of love. So the value that he placed on that hedonistic type of behavior was more important to him. And so the type of love that Don Juan was experiencing was more akin to the idea of ludos, which is one of 6 love styles that psychologists Clyde Hendricks and Susan Hendricks have proposed. It's akin to psychologist Robert Steinberg's idea of infatuation, which includes passionate feelings towards another person and potentially physical intimacy with that other person, but does not include any form of commitment, or does not include any type of real emotional bonding or real emotional intimacy. And so that value and meaning of life, that subjective experience, falls flat, because the objective experience, that objective interconnectedness of experience, falls flat. That shared interaction falls flat. So even if you experience that subjectively by each person, there's no or little common ground to stand on to derive any type of shared consciousness of meaning. And the depth to which an individual can step outside of themselves and into another person's experience, or the depth to which an individual can express their own experience to another, is the depth to which a shared validation of existence can occur. So somebody else saying, like, yes, this does have value, this does have meaning, this experience potentially is important. So in a way, supporting and validating what the individual is placing meaning on. And you can see how they are indeed interconnected, that one does need the other. When this shared validation occurs, the other person becomes a witness to an individual's meaning or value in life. And so while it's the individual's responsibility to determine how to process how they view life and how they place their value and meaning in life, it's a delicate balance of incorporating the wants, needs, health of others into that equation, because we can't exist without other human beings. Psychologists have found that deprivation of love or true interconnectedness can actually either be deadly or have negative neurological effects on the brain. And so psychologists such as Balkin, Bowlby, Spitz, among others, have really established that human touch, human consistency and dependency in supporting another's needs, human emotional interconnectedness is necessary for infants to live. Without these being properly in place, things like reactive attachment disorder can occur, neurological difficulties can occur, even death can occur. So in other words, we need to take responsibility for determining what our meaning of life is, but at the same time, we need a very real and deep level of connection with others, not only to thrive, but also to develop and grow and progress as healthy individuals. This doesn't stop when we're children. This continues on through our adult growth processes as well. Rogerian therapy, when used correctly, is one of my favorite forms of therapy to apply. It includes unconditional positive regard, empathy, and genuineness. And so it's a very authentic way of interacting from a therapist to a client. And so I'm just going to describe what each of those parts are a little bit so you get an idea of how that interconnectedness occurs. Unconditional positive regard is really this idea of acceptance for the client, for exactly who they are, what they've experienced, and where they are currently at. That's not to say that the therapist encourages any type of a dysfunctional behavior. They do not encourage that. They certainly encourage functional behavior, or discourages, the therapist does not discourage growth through that acceptance. They certainly encourage growth. But what it really is a form of acceptance of where the client is starting from and where the client is at, without criticizing or judging that client for being where they're at. So that removing of that shameful feeling, so that the client can grow and can progress to the best possible person that they can be. And so empathy is not a technique. A lot of times it's applied as a technique, right? Like as a tool, but empathy is not a technique. Instead, it's a true attempt to step into the perspective of the other person as they are. The purpose of connecting to them and connecting to their experience, trying to feel as they may have felt. It's not simply identifying or naming their emotions. It's instead stepping outside of yourself and attempting, at least, to step into their experience. Although you can't ever really truly step into another person's experience, it is an attempt to get as close as possible as you can. This is kind of like when you watch a movie and you become really immersed in that movie, and so you start identifying with one of the characters in the movie, or you become so much a part of the story you almost start believing it, right? It's that suspension of disbelief that you can have when you're watching a movie. It can also be like if you've ever had a dream where you're playing the role of a character that is not you in that dream, but experiencing things as they would experience, or even having different pieces of personality than you would typically have because you're playing this character in the dream. Genuineness is vulnerability in and of itself as the therapist. So allowing the client to get to know you, get to know your personality, and you get to know them. It is not the therapist pushing off their own issues on the client. It's nothing like that at all. It's simply allowing your personalities to really touch. So being genuine in those interactions. I feel that when a client is being vulnerable, it really is, or even when anyone is being vulnerable, it really is one of the truest acts of bravery that one can witness. It's very courageous when people are vulnerable. It's placing yourself out there and saying, do with me what you will. I hope you will be kind. And one might argue that other people that you're interacting with, or clients that you're interacting with, deserve that in return. So it's going to be much more difficult for a therapist who is not brave, who is not being genuine, who's not being courageous enough to be genuine, to lead a client that is brave, a client that is being genuine, to any form of healing. Because at that point, if you aren't being genuine as a therapist, that client, in a sense, is being braver than you are. at that point in time. So this is why genuineness is important in Rogerian therapy. The idea of unconditional positive regard is an interesting one that can lead us back to the idea of interconnectedness with other humans. It leads us back to this idea of living authentically, right? So it also leads us back to different types of love that we were talking about, or that we had mentioned before. And one type of love that it reminds me of is Hendricks and Hendricks' idea of agape. So this idea of selfless love or all-giving love, in more common terms, might be more what people would call unconditional love, which certainly is a form of unconditional positive regard for another human being, right? It brings us to the idea of the anam cara, which is a soulmate or a soul friend. So this idea of unconditional positive regard, empathy, genuineness, are not only concepts that are beneficial to a therapist-client relationship. This Rogerian theory, this Rogerian idea can be applied to any interpersonal relationships to help make them better or deepen the level of subjective meaning in life. So connecting on a deeper level to other individuals, attempting to genuinely touch personalities, attempting to truly step into another's shoes emotionally, accepting who someone is, where they're at, rather than trying to control them, but at the same time making sure, that you have your own personal healthy boundaries, and encouraging others to have healthy boundaries can really add greater value to a human being's life. The anam cara really embodies these ideas of self-love, unconditional love and acceptance of another, empathy, so treating another person as a human being rather than an external entity that doesn't have thoughts and emotions, right? Trying to step into their position because you care, because you're generally attempting to connect with them, and treat them in a way that is deserving and equal. Vulnerability, depth of connection, and authenticity and genuineness are all ideas that are embodied by the anam cara. This idea of the soul connection, if that's what one wants to call it. You could talk about this purely intellectually speaking too, if you're uncomfortable with the term soul. Some people are. You could talk about it purely intellectually. So whether you're talking about it intellectually though or spiritually, when one allows vulnerability, a mutual risk to occur, and opening fully to another, then a deepness of connection can occur, creating perhaps a soul friend or a soul mate that is now permanently connected to you. And so for this to occur, one has to have a true touching of personalities, a true touching of being. One has to set this soul friend or soulmate apart from others, and genuineness and integrity, so an unconditional regard of love, if you will, of intention, must occur for a true, genuine touching to occur. And so this is both a centered act and a decentered act. So self-love and unconditional love for another combined. So this idea of the anam cara incorporates the idea that one must be balanced and healthy and love themselves completely before, yes, fully and completely loving another. This concept is like Plato's and Aristophanes' discourse on split aparts, these androgynous beings who were male and female that were split apart, creating what was called the human wound. So the separation from one another, aloneness, right? Which can only be filled by love. So going back to this Don Juan idea, until he fully comes to love himself, until he has a full love for himself, and is able to be vulnerable with another human being to form a lasting bond, a validation of each other's existence, setting another person apart. He's not going to fill that human split apart wound, less magically speaking. He's not going to fill that wound of aloneness, this concept of aloneness in life and death. So the enrichment of the depth of his meaning of life suffers, resulting in having a flatter life experience eventually being left in this void of aloneness that has been fed by the type of behavior that he values. And so while living authentically gives us our best chance of having a life that is deep and meaningful and is validated by others, it's our responsibility as an individual to find what is good and right and a productive way of being. And it can't be disentangled from the need to share some form of an objective human experience with another human being. So whilst it's essential to make up our own minds rather than succumb to this group thinking or this group mentality, the group must be taken into account. Healthy limits and boundaries must be set. And if we see that the group itself is becoming, so society, right, is becoming or reacting in ways that are unhealthy or unbalanced, it is individuals' responsibility to help increase that balance, help increase the health of a society so that we all can share a healthier, balanced validation and interconnectedness and meaning of life. The healthier that society is, the easier it is for individuals within it to maintain their personal health, right, and ways of being. And so that's why it's important to think about all these different concepts that, yes, we do as individuals need to subjectively make up of our own mind and determine what is important and not important so that we can live in good faith. But at the same time, the way that the group is functioning is also important because it does affect us. And so making sure that we are as healthy as we can be in an authentic way and society is as healthy as we can be in an authentic way is really important. And so next time I hope to talk about things that occur in social media, in Hollywood, in the music industry, just out there, kind of that is affecting society, affecting the public, even society's customs or way of thinking here in the United States that could either be beneficial to being balanced and healthy or could have negative impacts on being balanced and healthy, because we're all interconnected in that way. And so to live authentically in a way that is meaningful, that validates our interconnectedness, we have to make sure that, we are healthy and that the group is healthy as well. So if you like this video or these concepts or these ideas, please press the like button on the bottom of your screen. If you want to see the next video or more videos that come up talking about these types of subjects, please subscribe and then my videos will pop up as they come up. I will be doing one probably about weekly, maybe a little bit more than that if I have a week that's not as busy as other weeks. But typically it'll be on a weekly basis, and I hope to see you next time. Take care.